Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, Mysterious Voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a short story that I read, because it is Short Story Tuesday. One that is about death, the afterlife, and string theory. I am referring to Lester Higata's String Theory Paradise by Barbara Hamby, which comes from the short story collection Lester Higata's 20th Century. For those who don't know, Barbara Hamby is a writer who's been writing for the past 30 years. She's written novels as well as poetry and short stories. She has won a number of awards for her work, and she currently teaches at a university, I think, in Florida. That might have changed since the pandemic. But yeah, that seems to be all the information that is really known about her. She seems to be an interesting writer. I did check out this book from my local library, so make sure that you patronize your local libraries, as that is super groovy. What's interesting about this book is that it's a collection of short stories, but they're all somewhat focused on Lester Higata's life, or people close to Lester Higata. So more of a collection of the life of this fictional person than anything else, which I've encountered with a few other short stories for this channel. I just find it very interesting that this is like the random short story that I checked out is actually a bunch of different stories about what a person's life. So, and that does have a few problems because some short stories build off others, but it says that they're all independent. But if they build off the others, then this is more of a book than anything else. So it's been mislabeled, I think, in my opinion. But without further ado, let's talk about Lester Higata's String Theory Paradise. I will do a brief summary, a little bit of an analysis, and we will move on from there. So Lester Higata's String Theory Paradise, which is always fun to say, that story focuses on Lester Higata. He's in his late 40s, and he appears to be dying of lung cancer. And he's still hanging around the house. Seems to be doing pretty well. The narrator notes that Lester's near the end of his life when he begins to see his dead father, who is hanging out in the garden. And Lester doesn't really seem perplexed by seeing his dead father. They begin to have a conversation about his name. Like, his father asks, why did you choose the name Lester? And Lester points out that he did it because it would make him appear to be more American, but more so than that, he knew that it would anger his mother in some way because he doesn't have a very good relationship with her. And so they also talk about his mother, and how they didn't have the best relationship, and even the father doesn't seem to have the best relationship. And they also talk about Hawaii, because this is where the story takes place, how a lot of things have changed for the better as well as for the worse. And they talk about heaven and hell, and how those are only temporary stops in the ultimate afterlife, where once you get tired of heaven or hell, you can go anywhere you want, forward, backwards in time. You're not necessarily pinned to the present moment, which seems to make Lester feel a bit happier about the overall process of dying. Lester finds himself awakened by his wife, which seems to indicate that maybe he saw his father in a dream. Maybe it wasn't actually a thing that happened. And she makes him lunch, and everything seems to be going well for them. And his daughter stops by after lunch, and they play a game of Scrabble, which they've done for quite some time. And they also talk about family and the afterlife and all kinds of stuff like that. Ultimately, Lester manages to beat his daughter in Scrabble, which is always nice. But after that ends, he sees his father again, specifically in a moment where it appears that Lester is going to die, because his father says that he wanted him to have one last moment with Linda before he died. So, and he also points out that Linda lets him win in Scrabble, which Lester kind of knew, which I think is a little cute moment in this ultimate sad point that's happening. As the story ends, Lester dies and he enters through a doorway, presumably to the afterlife. And the story notes that he's traveling back to old Hawaii, where all the roads and the tall buildings have been replaced by greenery, and Lester seems to be in a better place there as the story ends. In terms of analysis, I feel like there's a bit to talk about here, especially even though this is a short story and not a whole lot seems to happen. It does touch upon a few things here and there. One thing that Hamby talks about is death and the afterlife, which he seems to be blending science with religion here in talking about the afterlife. She notes that heaven and hell exist, but they are not the be-all, end-all. If you die and go to hell, that's really sort of, I guess it would be temporary for you. If you go to heaven, you don't have to stay there forever. Lester's father notes that there's no sort of organization to all of this. Lester's father might have seen Lester's mom, but ultimately they decided to part ways. So maybe that relationship wasn't really working out. And after you decide that you no longer want to be in heaven or hell, you can really go anywhere you want, because you're not stuck to the laws of time anymore. As Lester's father says, it's a multi-dimensional sort of thing now. So they get to travel through time and space to see really everything that they've wanted to see, like their family and in the younger years or their later years, whatever they really want. And I like how Barbara Hamby builds upon the ideas of string theory, because that's mentioned in this story. She says the ideas of quantum mechanics don't mesh with Einstein's theory of relativity, and I don't know if that's true or not, because I don't have a great enough scientific background, but I have a feeling that it might not actually be true. But it's interesting how she writes about this afterlife. Because we typically have views that only family matters, and once you die, you'll get to spend forever with the family that you love. But what happens if you didn't have the best relationship with your family? Where would you go then? And the answer is you could go anywhere. You could go by yourself. You could go with different people entirely. It's really up to you, because it is your afterlife. And it really does sound quite, I want to say controversial or even bold to say that, heaven and hell are only temporary. That even though someone was very bad and they might go to hell, that they wouldn't be in hell for very long. And I think the punishment is up to you for determining how long you need to be punished, or something like that. There is some talk of family in this story, and I think Barbara Hamby does a good job of exploring how maybe Lester didn't have that great of a relationship with his mother or father or his siblings or anything like that. But it's kind of vague, and I don't think she focuses as much attention as she needs to on it, especially if she's going to make that a centerpiece of the story, because it kind of seems vague, and I'm not really sure she knew what she was trying to say about all of that. And another thing that Hamby talks about is Hawaii, of the past and the present. It seems like she's trying to make some commentary on Hawaii's current state of affairs as compared to Hawaii in the past, not only with this story but with others in the collection, really highlighting where it's come from and where it's continuing to go. Lester seems to love Hawaii in the story, but it could be better. There are a number of things that aren't quite working out with Hawaii. He mentioned specifically like white outsiders, bureaucrats who aren't focusing on Hawaii's best interest, and a loss of identity overall, which is really a summation of all the problems that Hawaii has had since the 1800s. Because I think history is important to consider here, how in the 1890s, the Dole Fruit Company basically instigated a coup against the Hawaiian royalty at the time. And that led to the white settlers in Hawaii gaining power and running Hawaii as a territory until the 1950s. And at that point, after basically the Hawaiian people had lost a lot of power, the United States made Hawaii an official state, which allowed it to be run as like an actual state instead of a territory. And in that process, Hawaii has been run by politicians effectively, who aren't considering Hawaii's best interests, such as transit or water preservation or something like that. And the people of Hawaii have often lost power, and like the native Hawaiians are often pushed to the wayside in favor of tourists who are only going to stay there a couple days or maybe a week. And so that prioritization of the tourist over everything else makes Hawaii, like less great than what it could be, a shadow of the Hawaii of the past. And so what's interesting is that Lester's paradise in this story is really that of a former Hawaii before it became a sort of urban jungle of sorts, at least in some places on the Hawaiian Islands. Other places in Hawaii, it's still very much, jungle, wilderness, etc. But I think for the purposes of this story, Hamby is focusing on the urbanization of various places in Hawaii. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. He felt the music of the universe vibrating in him, the rain washing over him, washing the years away, the roads, the skyscrapers, all the strip clubs by Alana Moana, H3 to Kaneohe that desecrated the sacred Hawaiian lands, the military bases and the sad karaoke bars near Schofield Barracks. It was all gone, and he moved through the green land with its fishing pools, heiau, and taro fields, the world opening up, timeless and relaxed as a saxophone solo by a broken man whose voice was too sweet for this world. And so there you're really getting at the paradise that Lester sees, and how that's resembling the Hawaii of old, how like everything has been removed, all the signs of colonization and I guess urbanization, such as the military and the large buildings and stuff like that, are all gone. And so Lester's connection is really with the Hawaii of old, which seems to be, a commentary by Hamby about, where Hawaii has come and how that's probably not in the best interest of Hawaiians, that it has turned into this sort of urbanized tourist paradise that doesn't consider the needs of the native Hawaiians. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Lester Higata's String Theory Paradise. A pretty fun short story, although it's probably not one of the best short stories that I've read. I feel like there are others that I've read that have gotten at similar ideas in a much better way. So ultimately, I can't really recommend it if you're interested in Hawaiian culture or the issues that Hawaiians face throughout the 20th century, because there's a bunch of stories told throughout the different years. Maybe check this one out. Although I wouldn't say it's worth going to your library and purposely seeking it out, but maybe my opinion might change as time goes on and I learn more about Hawaiian affairs or something like that. If you read read this before, you simply want to comment on something I said, do so below. Let's have a discussion about Lester Higata's String Theory Paradise. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so I guess more people can find out about this author and this book if they don't already know. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and Hawaiian travels. Farewell.